What's up, guys? Buddy Figueroa here coming at you with a discography ranking. Today we're talking Dayseeker in preparation for their upcoming album, Creature of the Black Night, releasing tomorrow, October 24th. Dayseeker is a band I've followed for years now, and the biggest draw to them for me, actually there are two now that I think about it. For one, vocalist Roy Rodriguez is just an amazing vocalist. That's something that re-listening to all these albums in preparation for this video really did ingrain in me even more so than before. Just how talented he is, whether it's the clean singing, whether it's the screams, he's just an absolute beast. And also just the raw, just gut level emotion that gets jam-packed into this band's music. At its best, Dayseeker's music is just so vulnerable and emotionally powerful and weighty. And they aren't really a band that I've really been able to fully piece my thoughts together about how I would rank their albums until this video. So let's get right into it. We got 5 albums this time around, and we will of course start out with the number 5 pick on here, which I'm going to give to the band's most recent album, Dark Sun, in 2022. You'll come to find out from this video that there really aren't any albums that this band has put out that I don't like. And this album, even being in last place, is the best example of that, because I still overall enjoy this record. It is the most recent example of Dayseeker's trend of getting pretty much progressively more and more melodic with every release, which is fine. I mean, Dayseeker to me have always excelled with their more melodic stuff in particular, so I don't see a problem with them going more melodic at all. I think the biggest drawback to this album for me is, again, actually 2 things now I think about it. For one, the guitars in particular. They feel like they have a little bit less of a presence on this record than they did on all of Dayseeker's prior albums. And the result is that the more straightforward type songs on here just don't really feel as musically interesting. Like the track Neon Grave, which I know was one of the biggest hits on this record, the song just doesn't really do anything for me. It comes off a little bit flat, a little bit sluggish. And then there's the worst song on this record, Homesick. This track is it's like Owl City Core. They just don't really have enough going on musically and instrumentally to add much to the listening experience, at least for me. And also overall, this record does feel a little bit less inspired than other Dayseeker records, which in the past have felt extremely inspired. I do think there was overall a bit less emotion in this record, at least compared to, again, the band's past works, which were packed with it. But, I mean, it's still there on a song like Paper Heart, which is just so tender and just overall a gorgeous song. The hit song on here, Without Me, is another one I love. Again, it's just packed with emotion. It's got a super powerful chorus. Overall, though, I think this album's highlights are when they're more explorative on here. Like the intro to Dream State, which has these twinkling synths and brings in this appropriate kind of spacey atmosphere. Dark Sun, the title track, is an example of the band almost using some subtle dance music influence, just in that consistent kind of steady beat that paces the song along. It's just so infectious, you can't just help but stomp your foot or nod your head to it or something. And another track that does that really well is Crying While You're Dancing, which might even be catchier. And although the instruments don't take as much precedent on here, I do think this is a very vocal-focused album overall. That's not really a bad thing considering just how awesome the vocals are performed and delivered. So not as rock solid as the first few records, but still overall pretty solid. I'll give the top 3 tracks to Without You, Paper Hearts, and Crying While You're Dancing. Next up in the number 4 spot is the band's 3rd record, Dreaming is Sinking, Waking is Rising. And it actually shares some comparisons with Dark Sun in a sense that it followed up a really great record in the form of Origin that I'll obviously talk about shortly. And it just feels a little bit overall less inspired than that record that came before it. But overall, this still is an inspired record. I think maybe the biggest takeback for me here is that some of the tracks, unlike past Dayseeker material, within themselves kind of have some jarring and stark mood shifts. Like Vultures, the intro track, is a really tense start to this album, but then the song never really gets to explore that tension because it just kind of instantly cut off for when the melodic parts come in. I just feel like that transition from that really ugly intro into this really melodic part is a little bit rough around the edges. Cold Dark Winter also kind of suffers from that to an extent. And then the closer, Waking is Rising, is probably my least favorite song on here. This song is just a little bit dull to me, stark in its transitions once again. But once again, this is still a record that I enjoy overall. There's still some awesome material on here. Just like Dark Sun, too, this record to me is at its best when it's at its most explorative, stylistically. Like Come Hell or High Water is a track where Rory actually sings clean over some really heavy music, the intro being a great instance of that, and it sounds really good. I like how that part breaks free from the typical screen verses over heavy music and then melodic chorus formula. And then Carved from Stone, the prior track, takes on some R&B influence in a way with a lot of Rory's vocal cadences. And also the melodic ideas on tracks like Hanging by a Thread and Counterpart feel pretty new and pretty fresh at the time for Dayseeker, and as a result, these are still memorable tracks. Although Hanging On by a Thread is a little bit short, even though I realize it does kind of continue into the next track. Another solid album, but also one that just jumps out to me as one of this band's weaker records. Top 3 tracks I'll give to 6 Feet Under, Carved from Stone, and Come Hell or High Water. For my number 3 pick, I'm taking it all the way back to the band's debut, What It Means to Be Defeated. Overall, a very, very solid debut album. This definitely is probably the record that conforms most to a straightforward metalcore sound. Like, there's a lot of stuff on here that brings to mind As They Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage and bands like that. Fitting of metalcore, tracks like Incinerate and Resurrect bring in a lot of dissonance, which I enjoy. You have tracks like Black Earth and the title track, What It Means to Be Defeated, that has some genuinely good riffing. This is without question the band's heaviest material to date still, as they've kind of, like I said, drifted more and more melodic with each release. But listening back on this record, it's a very, very solid debut. A lot of times I feel like debuts are albums that are easy to put lower in these rankings. But, I mean, there's some genuinely great stuff on here. Like Collision Survives is a song that has some really powerful melodies. Hollow Shell as well. That song in particular is just packed with emotion. Sleep in the Sea does bring in some of that more synthetic influence that becomes more present on later material. Dead Man is this cool, somber ballad. I mentioned Resurrect earlier. That's a track that, even with its dissonance, just brings in a lot of emotion for being one of the heaviest songs on here. I think the main flaw with this record is just kind of the production, the bass drums in particular, and the rhythm guitar tone kind of sound a bit thin. As a result, I don't think the heavy parts quite hit as much as they could. And the mix in general is a little bit muddy, and as a result, the album does have somewhat of an unrefined sound to it. But for being a debut with somewhat of an unrefined sound, this is a really solid start. And if you're trying to get into Dayseeker maybe, and you find yourself more of a fan of those mid-2000s metalcore bands like Killswitch and As I Lay Dying and maybe Bullet for My Valentine, this would be the album that I would recommend to you the most. It's definitely their most metal album. I guess that's a good way of putting it. Top 3 tracks go to Hollow Shell, Resurrect, and Dead Man. Number 2 is Sleep Talk. This is the record that got me into the band. The title track in particular is the first song I ever heard from them that got me hooked on them, and it's still probably my favorite song they've ever put out. If you're watching this video and you somehow haven't heard the Sleep Talk title track, please listen to it. The biggest jump stylistically that the band made on this record to my ears is that they really, really cranked up the synthetic and electronic influence on here. A great instance being the opening track, Drunk, which is pretty much full-on synthetics for the majority of the time, and it works really well, especially with Rory's vocals. But then you also have tracks like Crooked Soul and The Color Black, which bring in some pretty prominent techie riffing styles, more so than Dayseeker has ever displayed on any other record before or after this one. The riffing on those songs brings to mind to me, like, I don't know, Born of Osiris, like an actual like progressive metalcore band. Yet they're also balanced out with, again, some really, really prominent emotion. Crooked Soul has those really soulful verses, and then The Color Black has some really rich atmosphere and vocal layering, which add to the emotion as well. Already Numb, one of the ballads on here, is, again, really tender and has a lot of rich vocal layering that just make the song sound really full. There's also Crash and Burn, which has very, very well executed mood shifts. I will give them that. Something I criticized them for on the record before this one. They execute really well with this song. And what else is there to say about the title track? I mean, this track is absolutely beautiful. It has literally everything. It's got the soul and the emotion. It's got the grit. It's powerful, and it's just super fucking catchy. They hit the holy trinity with this style of music with this song. Ironically, much like on Dark Sun, the other main hit on here, Burial Plot, is my least favorite song on here. I just feel like the melodies in here aren't very creative. They all feel very familiar. And that attempt in the chorus to be really impactful just doesn't really hit for me because it's not super catchy. And Starving to Be Empty later in the record is a little bit cheesy with the whole male-female vocalist back-and-forth dynamic. That's always something that I struggle to get into with any song. It's always something that comes off like a little bit too Disney princess movie for me, and it comes off a bit corny as a result. That's just my taste. But no, aside from that on here, this is an amazing album. Still has my favorite song by this band, period, on here. And a record that I obviously highly recommend, me putting it at their second top spot on here. Top 3 tracks I'll give to Sleep Talk, the title track, obviously, The Color Black, and Crooked Soul. And my number 1 favorite album from Dayseeker is Origin, their second album. This record is beautiful. There's so much genuine, raw, in-your-face emotion to where you listen to some of these songs and, like, I don't care what you're doing. Like, these songs will stop you, like, right in your place because of how moving they are and how much they really hit right in the heart. Whether it's a really lively yet dramatic song like The Burning of Bridges, which has some great riffing and some really cool melodies, or the short but crescendoing Lucid Dreamer that also kind of fades into the next track, God Without a Face, which are much heavier songs that both talk about struggling with faith lyrically, and I find that especially relatable. The World Was Quiet is an impassioned, mournful breakup song that has some absolutely gorgeous melodies. There's the gut-wrenching ballad Spotless Mind on here about losing a loved one, and Never See the Sunrise. The Closer is another one about, I think, losing a daughter in particular. Cancer Uncontained and Earth Will Turn are both packed with emotion. There's so much to feel when listening to this album. In addition to that, I think out of all of Dayseeker's material album to album, this record shows the most audible growth in Rory's vocal performances. And it somewhat also establishes a sound for Dayseeker that they would stick to. Whereas on the previous record, their debut, they kind of conformed to that post-hardcore and somewhat metalcore style. Here, they kind of just sound like they're doing whatever they want to do and creating their own sound and using their own inspiration rather than kind of adapting to it another sound. My only criticism on this album is that the darkness won't divide is kind of a pointless interlude. Doesn't really need to be here. Aside from that, I would call this album perfect. Top 3 tracks, Spotless Mind, The World Was Quiet, and The Burning of Bridges. So yeah, that's all I have for this ranking. Please leave your ranking in the comments below. I'd be very curious to hear your guys' opinions on Dayseeker's catalog. Stay tuned and hit the subscribe button to watch the review that I will upload about Creature of the Black Knight after it drops, where you can kind of see where that record will fit in to the discography after I give it a score at the end of that review. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace.